Once, this was a theatre of dreams. It was a fortress of a club that once ruled England and the world. From the historic 1999 treble to conquering Europe in 2008, Manchester United were football royalty, feared by all and respected for their storied legacy. But
you don't even need glasses to analyze and to see where the problems are. It's not enough to do some little minor amendments, some minor cosmetic things. No, in medicine you would see this is an operation at the open heart.
because of one man, a club once known for glory soon fell apart.
That was a shocker, an absolute shocker. The timing couldn't have been worse. Against what I've called half-decent teams, and as soon as they played a proper team, they've been obliterated.
But it's not as simple as you think, because this story is about how the Glazers hired a man who knew next to nothing about football to manage the biggest football club in England. This is not a story of bad luck. This is how one man destroyed Manchester United forever.
I bet you can't believe how bad the United team is. This group of players, the mistakes they're making, they can't seem to get around the pitch. There's no power in the team. That's the bit I would be frustrated with.
Before Manchester United became a mess, Manchester United stood for something. This was a football institution built on legacy, on grit, on dominance, on uncompromising will to win. Under Sir Alex Ferguson, Manchester United were the gold standard. With him, they won 13 Premier League titles, 3 Champions Leagues, 5 FA Cups, the first English club to achieve a treble, and literally won almost everything with him.
I think that in terms of the history of our club, we should have won it more, and I wanted to win it more again, and trying to get ourselves into that bracket of winners' wake.
But here's what makes that special. Sir Alex Ferguson didn't just build his team to play football, he built a culture around Manchester that would make them the best. The community meant everything to the club. With them, he formed a bond unbroken to this day. Long before the Galacticos became a thing, Manchester United was the home of world-class players. From Cantona to Keane, to Rooney and Ronaldo, to Owen and Beckham, Sir Alex reinvented his squad every few years and still won everything. While other clubs brought heroes, United had a system that groomed them from the ground up. They had a structure and a mentality incomparable to any other. And even beyond Ferguson, at the helm of affairs, they had legends behind the scenes too. They had David Gill, the CEO, who handled football operations with precision. He understood the club, he understood the sport. Most importantly, he understood Sir Alex, and he stayed out of the footballing decisions unless they mattered. But as the trophies piled up and the years passed, something else was happening in the shadows. In 2005, Manchester United was in a deep financial black hole, and they needed a bailout. A bidding war over this historic club was one of the greatest ever. It had even names like Gaddafi and almost any business mogul you could think of trying to take over. But Manchester is not like any other club, so they had to be careful. But as you already know, the Glazers took over the club with a leveraged buyout, buying the club with money the club didn't have. But the deal was more than that, because what you probably didn't know was that there was a man who helped make that happen, and his name was Ed Woodward, a former JP Morgan investment banker. He was the numbers guy who promised the Glazers the Manchester deal, and he delivered on it. But here's the thing. Woodward wasn't just some random investor. He was the man who built the financial model to get the Glazers in. And once they were in, they rewarded him with power. Not football power, not business advice, but full control over Manchester United's footballing direction. And that was the beginning of the end for Manchester United.
Just days after Chief Executive Peter Kenyon announced his resignation, there are reports this morning of an even bigger shockwave about to hit Old Trafford. 3 foreign billionaires, at least as rich as Roman Abramovich, are apparently about to launch separate bids to take over Manchester United.
The truth is, when Sir Alex Ferguson left Manchester United, they lost more than a manager. Sir Alex wasn't just the man on the touchline. He did way more for the club. Under him, recruitment wasn't about hype or agents or YouTube highlights. It was about fitness. It was about hiring the right character. And more importantly, it was about building a winning team, not a brand. He had scouts planted across the UK and other parts of the world, often sitting quietly in lower league games, watching, waiting for the right talent. Sir Alex once said, "We scout people, not players." If you didn't have the attitude, the humility, or the toughness, you weren't coming in. That was how they found Pogba, Ronaldo, Giggs, and so many other players. And this didn't stop at the pitch. Ferguson's influence ran deep into the culture of the city. There are stories of local Manchester residents calling the staff to say they saw a player eating the wrong thing, or out too late clubbing. Sir Alex ran a tight ship on the field, and in the entire city. This is why when he finally announced his retirement, the pressure wasn't just to replace the manager, it was to find the next builder. And the club knew it. They needed someone who understood Manchester United. And so, in 2013, when David Gill stepped down as CEO and Ferguson retired as manager, Ed Woodward was handed full control of Manchester United's football direction. Before his assumed position, Woodward had helped United improve the team's financial position. As a result, the team was in a very good position, winning the Premier League in 2006 and 7, 2007-8, 2008-9, 2010-11, and 2012-13. They also won the Champions League in 2008 and reached the final again in 2009 and 2011. However, shortly after Sir Alex Ferguson's retirement and David Gill's departure, Woodward was promoted to Chief Executive Officer, which effectively meant he was in charge of all footballing operations. But unlike Gill, Woodward's gaze shifted from the pitch to the profit margins. He chased lucrative sponsorship deals and revenue growth at the expense of footballing success. This approach sowed the seeds of decline, after which the cracks began to show. So, to answer, what exactly went wrong under Ed Woodward? The answer would be, well, almost everything.
Just explain to us how it's been impacted, actually, just over last night.
Well, look, Manchester United's shares are one of the biggest fallers on the New York Stock Exchange today. The shares have fallen 8% so far. Last night they closed at $14.54. At the moment they are trading at $13.38.
When Sir Alex Ferguson and his crew left instead of replacing that vision with another football mind, the Glazers handed the keys to a banker. Woodward was a marketing genius, no one denies that. Financially, he was thriving. However, on the pitch, United were a different story. Now, it's not like Woodward was intentionally trying to sabotage the team, but his lack of experience in football operations really hurt. He made a string of poor choices, ultimately affecting the team's performance on the pitch. It was like he was trying to find the perfect fit, but he ended up with many mismatched pieces instead. And don't even get me started on the players he brought in. Take, for example, some of his most expensive flop buys, like Angel Di Maria, who arrived for a club record €59.7 million in 2014, but never lived up to the hype, and left for a lesser sum after just one season. Or Memphis Depay, who also failed to hit the ground running for Manchester United fully. The same plague also hit Paul Pogba, who returned to the club for a then world record fee of $93 million in 2016. In fact, we could also mention other expensive flop signings, like Romelu Lukaku for $90 million, Eric Bailly, Anthony Martial, Alexis Sanchez, Jadon Sancho, and many other players who were brought in to bring the club back to its glory days. They all turned out to be wrong. Even after spending over $1.43 billion and running at a debt of $1 billion, they still have no concrete glory to show for it. The club neglected to build a strong core of homegrown talent, and without a steady stream of young players coming through the ranks, United became reliant on inconsistent and often overpriced signings. To make matters worse, the club's coach recruitment strategy was a mess. From the chosen one, David Moyes, to the special one, Jose Mourinho, to the Dutch one, Van Gaal, all came and went, each with their own set of issues. Moyes lacked the experience, Van Gaal's style was too redundant, and Mourinho's tactics were too negative or old-fashioned. The search for a suitable replacement continued, with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer eventually taking the reins. The fans loved him. However, his lack of consistent results led to his departure in 2021. This constant change of philosophy left players confused and hindered the long-term development. The lack of a clear tactical identity wasn't the only problem. Reports of player cliques and clashes with managers, like the well-publicized spat between Mourinho and Paul Pogba, created a fractured atmosphere. There was a lack of unity on the pitch, a lack of unity in the community, plus the toxic dressing room dynamic undoubtedly impacted on-field performances. So, while Woodward improved finances and profits for the Glazers' pockets, it came at the cost of footballing success. And the consequences, as you'd expect, were dire. Manchester United became a team adrift, failing to qualify for the Champions League consistently, lacking a clear tactical identity, and having a fractured dressing room. So while the Glazers' pockets grew fatter, Manchester United's footballing credibility crumbled. And by 2021, the fans had had enough. That was the peak of the stadiums echoing with "Glazers out" chants. But there was another name, shouted just as loud: Ed Woodward out. Clearly, both parties would never be a good fit for each other. But before Ed Woodward left Old Trafford for good, he made one final move. As a last-ditch effort to rewrite his legacy, what he did next would change everything.
We are hearing reports that Ed Woodward has resigned as the chairman of Manchester United.
Ed Woodward, who was one of the driving forces, of course, at Manchester United behind this new Super League, Ed Woodward has stepped down as executive vice chairman of Manchester United.
With the pressure mounting, Woodward needed to fix his legacy before stepping down. So, what did he do? He decided to settle his affairs before bidding Old Trafford a final goodbye. Instead of delivering what could have been remembered as one of the greatest parting gifts in club history, something else played out entirely. In 2021, Erik ten Hag was arguably the hottest young coach in world football. He ticked all the boxes for Manchester United. He was a patient coach. He was a winning coach who also knew how to use homegrown talent. He already had top experiences, even leading his team to the UCL semis after defeating the mighty Madrid. Woodward had one final chance to steer Manchester United back onto the right path, and for a moment, it looked like he would. He identified Ten Hag as the long-term solution as a replacement for Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, who was already struggling with results. But here's the problem. Like every move before it, Woodward's final act looked right on paper, but was flawed in execution. However, Ten Hag was not brought in immediately. Instead, he first brought in Jadon Sancho as the marquee signing to finally bring some real firepower to the wings. Then, Ralf Rangnick was appointed as the interim messiah to steady the ship before Ten Hag could arrive. But what was meant to be a controlled transition turned into another chapter of chaos. Rangnick publicly exposed the rot. He said the quiet part out loud: Manchester United needs open heart surgery. And he wasn't wrong, because to date, Manchester United has needed that surgery. By the time Ten Hag arrived, the club wasn't ready for his project. The players were broken, the culture was fractured, the dressing room was toxic. And then there was Sancho, the £73 million signing, who was meant to be a new face for the attack. But like so many before him, he was thrown into a squad with no spine and no structure. From injuries to attitude issues to off-field tensions, it didn't take long before Sancho became another member of a broken system. The same pattern, repeating itself again. Even Woodward's farewell rebuild was sabotaged by the very problems he spent a decade creating. So when he finally left his position in February 2022, he didn't leave behind a club ready for the future. He left a disorientated giant still clinging to the past. One with £1 billion in debt, countless failed signings, an identity crisis that still hasn't been resolved. Ed Woodward promised to modernize Manchester United. Instead, he turned it into a global sponsorship machine with no footballing soul. He was the man who brought Manchester United from dynasty to dysfunction. And by the time he walked away, the damage had already been done.
Glory, glory, Tottenham Hotspur! Manchester United are left with nothing but a pile of regret time drought is over.
Ed Woodward's decisions didn't just haunt Manchester United in his era. Those decisions are why Manchester United sit 14th in the Premier League today. And the biggest example of that is Erik ten Hag. Yes, Ten Hag is a proper manager. Yes, he brought trophies. But the environment in which he worked wasn't set up for success. It was poisoned before he ever signed the contract. Let's break it down. In his first season, Ten Hag, in a last-ditch effort to get results, made some bold moves. He enforced discipline by freezing out players like Ronaldo and Sancho. When the results didn't pan out as expected, they had to look for other solutions, which turned out to be on impulse. For example, he brought in Lisandro Martinez, his old general from Ajax. He greenlit the signing of Casemiro, and of course, he spent £85 million on Antony, a player many say he overvalued based on personal familiarity. But let's be honest, the main reason why the decisions fell down to Ten Hag was because Ed Woodward never put in place a sporting director or any recruitment strategies. So, they had to result in signing hyped players who never lived up to those expectations. At first, it started well. He ended United's trophy drought with Carabao Cup wins. He beat Barcelona in the Europa League. He even finished third in the Premier League, securing Champions League football again. But it came at a massive cost, because most of these players weren't smart investments. They were simply band-aids to problems that needed surgery. For example, Casemiro was 30 plus years old when he signed, and he's not lived up to the pedestal to date. Antony was probably the worst of them all, honestly. We need no comments. The list of failures goes on with Onana and Mason Mount. And what was the result? In 2023-24, Manchester United recorded their worst ever Premier League finish in terms of points. Just 60. They slumped to 8th place, missing out on Champions League football and barely clinging to potential Europa spot. And the worst part was there's no clear style of play. And if there's one bright spot from this entire era, it's Bruno Fernandes. The only signing that made sense. The only player who showed up week after week, dragging the team forward with intensity, goals, and leadership. Without Bruno, this team would have collapsed a long time ago. But even Bruno can't carry a broken structure forever. The truth is, Manchester United is a shadow of its former self right now. And it is all because of one man. Until they fix the whole club, no manager, no player, and no miracle will bring them back to the top. But you know what? We could be wrong. So, let us know what you think in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, check out this one and find out how an even bigger dynasty fell, all because of one decision. See you in a sec.